All right. What's going on, John?
How you doing, sir? How you doing?
Everything's going pretty good. All right. Want
Nice.
to thank everybody for joining us for our monthly mental health conversation. Um, we asking everybody that's watching, if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Twitter, go ahead and share the post. I learned in a meeting, an in-person meeting for Bible study last week, uh, that some of my older people didn't understand what I said when I said share. They've been hearing share the whole time, but they didn't know what it meant. And so, if I can give a quick tutorial for people that and figured out how to log on but don't understand what it means to share, it's a little arrow that's pointing to the right. That's it's probably near your comments if you're on a iPhone. Just click that arrow and then the option will come up and say share, and you share it. Then it goes on your page. And so we ask if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, go ahead and share the post, and we will be extremely appreciative. I'm not going to put it in the hands of the coordinator of our mental health ministry, of John Park.
All right. Hello, sir. Hello, everyone. Glad to be here again. Yes, it's interesting the things you find out that people don't know until somebody tries to tell you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's happening every day in my life, but it's usually my 3-year-old telling me stuff I don't know. Oh man. So today we're just talking about managing disappointment. I've realized throughout my life that I don't put disappointment, or I shouldn't say I don't pop up disappointment to the level of like mental health issue as much as I should have, in a sense that I think people just manage disappointments in life and kind of expect things to happen and don't really deal with the processes that are happening kind of on the inside when they get met with disappointment. So I kind of wanted to talk today just about the idea of what disappointment looks like, ways of management, some practical tools we can utilize, and then just spiritual approaches as well, just in terms of looking at disappointment. I hope that sounds okay.
Sir.
All right, cool. Okay, we go to the first slide. All right, so understanding disappointment, right? So, textbook definition of disappointment: it's a feeling of sadness or frustration that occurs when our expectation, hopes, or desires are not met. And I think a lot of times, um, disappointment is one of those words that are on our emotions wheel or our feelings wheel that doesn't get explored enough or talked about enough. And I think life oftentimes has a way of handing out disappointments, and it, depending on how old we are or depending on where we are in life or what stage we are in life, a disappointment I think gets swept under the rug just a little bit too easy, and it has a way of becoming a thing where when we're disappointed enough in life, or when we're disappointed about the right things, or I should say the when we're disappointed about things that others tell us we shouldn't be disappointed about, we kind of minimize the feelings that we have, and it just becomes an undercurrent of our life to where it bruises us, it bothers us, it disturbs our mental health, it disturbs our pieces in ways that are kind of unseen. And one of the things I think that people use all the time with explaining disappointment is they'll give the analogy of like the little kid who's waiting on the porch for his daddy to show up to take him out to play ball or something, and the dad never shows up. And so we use that expression, I've been waiting on the porch for you all this time, as a lighthearted joke or whatever the case may be, when somebody don't come by and see you, or a family member doesn't come by, or somebody doesn't show up to an event or a party. But that little boy on the porch who was waiting for his dad to show up, who's been sitting there for 20 years, doesn't realize how much that level of disappointment and that type of disappointment has affected him or her over time, right? And so I think we jest a lot about disappointment, but it does have some real implications. And so, like we're saying here, it can stem from various sources. It can come from personal failures, from unmet expectations, or external circumstances that are kind of beyond our control. It makes sense.
People that have the feeling but didn't know where it came from. And then
Mm.
after some digging, find out, oh, that's where it came from. I've seen some family members with some frustrations and didn't necessarily know, I didn't necessarily know they felt that way toward other family members, and they didn't even realize why they felt the way. And then after they've had some conversations with people with your skill set, they realized, and then they were able to kind of start dealing with it because they didn't even know it was something that needed to be dealt with.
Yeah. Yep. It happens so subtly and it comes from so many different directions and it can happen so easily that I think we become numb to it. There's a lot of times in the community you hear about people making bad choices when it comes to like um, people that they get into relationships with, and then you get the moniker. I'm trying to be positive, but it's just one of those things where we get disappointed by people so much. We make bad choices in who we partner with or who we choose to have children by or be in families with or whatever the case may be because of the disappointments that other people have set up for us. So we start to feel like, oh, this is the way life should be, or this is the way the man should treat a woman, or this is the way a woman should treat a man, or this is what it's looked like to be in a school, as we've talked about before in different places, Pastor Ross, like having a school district that fails all the black students in the school district, no matter what school they go to, right? And so we come to be disappointed in our school systems and our spouses and other people in relationships, and it becomes so normal that we don't have good expectations, or we lower our expectations, or we don't have healthy views of just things. And again, I would say that disappointment is such a subtle thing that it just creeps in, and next thing you know, we got ourselves in a situation. All right, we can go to the next slide. And here I have just a short list of common causes of disappointments, and we'll kind of just run through these. And so I think the first one, unrealistic expectations, is something that I see a lot with couples when there's some either unmet expectation or a spouse has unrealistic expectations for their husband or their wife, or when people in premarital counseling, perhaps they don't have real conversations about gender roles, if that's a thing. What does it look like to stay at home when there's a child born? What does it look like to take out the trash? Who does this? Who does that? And then we just assume that the other person is going to be XYZ or do XYZ to you. And so when you have those unrealistic expectations, or you don't have those conversations to set proper expectations, we become disappointed. We become disillusioned, or that other person, we start to spite them or hate them or feel certain ways about them because they're not meeting the expectations that we have for them. And it's one thing to have unmet expectations, but it's another thing to also have unrealistic expectations. I think sometimes for certain people, just using a marriage as another example, we may want our spouse to be our best friend, and maybe the spouse doesn't feel like they can be that or wants to be that, and they have a different idea of what it means to be in a relationship. Well, if you don't have that conversation up front, and this person is just longing and longing and longing to be your best friend and go on all the trips together and do this and do that, and the other person's like, yo, I just need some space. If you don't have that conversation, that could lead to disappointment because you had one of the persons, or maybe both of the persons, had unrealistic expectations of what the other person's role was going to be in their life. And I think one of the things now that is a really big deal is comparison with others. And that comes from, I think now more so than ever, is with this internet and with this social media, and with the TikToks and the Instagram. People put forth their best lives online, Facebook, Instagram. They're not, generally, people don't use those platforms to tell you how sorry their day is, or how bad they feel, unless they're looking for some kind of sympathy, or how they're failing at work, or how their marriage is falling apart. Again, unless they're looking for that type of attention. But because we have so much access to people's lives and we can see all the good, they're always on vacation. They're always this, they're always that, they're always doing something you've always wanted to do. They're always able to experience the finer things in life. And we use that as a litmus test of how our life should be. And we find ourselves in a failing situation because, or we find ourselves to be disappointed because we have these comparison points. Something I like to use as an analogy oftentimes is I don't know if you've ever seen, it was a meme that was going around a long time ago, and it was a young lady who was, it was like a selfie, and she was looking like her head was laid out at the beach, and she was like best vacation ever, some kind of hashtags or whatever. But then somebody busted her out because were video recording her at a distance and showing that she was at a golf course in a sand trap. And she had her head in the sand trap, pretending like she was out at the beach, trying to pretend that she was out having a good time for people on the internet. I don't know if you've ever seen that, Pastor Ross.
Wow, it's crazy when somebody go to those kind of extents, but I guess it's what you stuff that you desire from people. I guess the way you want people to look at you. I um I had my wife. I guess she must be my mental health therapist. She I had this real, I forgot what it's called, but you'll probably catch. But like, so like for me, like if things are out of place, based on based on what I look for, it kind of it used to really bother me, and sometimes I would have kind of get disappointed that people didn't take that initiative to fix it or straighten it themselves. And then my wife had to tell me, no, hey Ron, everybody's not like you. And so what you expect, and it doesn't make anybody better or worse or anything. It's just people are different. And so the kind of things you expect. And so even like as a pastor, there's certain things that I like done a certain way. And so for me, the best thing is just go do it, and because everybody doesn't think like you. Everybody doesn't, the things that you think should be in place or the way the church should look or this or that. Everybody doesn't think like you. They're different people, and so she really had to help me through that. I mean, I got it so bad to where, if I set up a table with a display or there's a display set up that somebody else set up and things aren't straight on it, I go and kind of straighten everything out, straighten the papers out, and then, somebody might come behind me and just look and just leave stuff spread out. And in my mind, I'm like, come on, man, just all you got to do is straighten it back out once you looked at what you wanted. But once she told me
Yeah.
that, I realized that that doesn't stand out to everybody like it stands out to me. And so if it bothers me when I walk past and things are kind of just not straight, just straighten it out, and then it'll cause you from being frustrated, and and just things will go along smooth. So that was real helpful to me when she just told me, "Hey, Ron, everybody is not like you, and so just because you have these expectations of other people, they might not necessarily. I mean, it's just not really unfair. It's kind of like what you said. It's unrealistic, not because they can't do it, but because that's the way you expect things to be." And doesn't mean that everybody else have to think the way you think.
No, that's 100% right on, and I won't give you a diagnosis for that. I just say, hey, work through the frustration, sir. You'll be all right. But no, that's interesting because the one of the biggest things I've learned in 13 years of marriage, and I'm not saying it's because of my spouse. It's just I realized that there are certain things that I'm concerned about that
Right.
people in my household aren't concerned about, right?
Right.
And so it's like you I have had at times the expectation that, oh, we're all going to be doing the same things the same way, and we all want things to be a certain way. All with this, we all want that. But I come to find out like, oh, I'm the only person, and now I'm the bad guy because I'm always the one saying do this, do this, do this, get this, and everybody else just wants to live their best life. And the imaginary fairy maid is going to come and make everything clean or whatever the case may be. Um, but I've had to realize, like, well, one, me and my wife are different people. My children are children, and anything that doesn't involve being fun is a bother to them. So I've had to manage my emotions around that and really ask the Lord to help me. Like, hey, These things aren't big deals, but if my children would just do this, they wouldn't have to cry when they have to spend an hour doing something because they could have done that 5 minutes a day and then be done with it. But they want to choose to wait until Friday when they're trying to go outside or do something. Now they got to spend an hour to 2 hours doing this thing that would have only taken 5 minutes per day, right? And so, even though it makes sense to me, they're kids, and what I'm saying doesn't make sense, and they just want to do what they want to do. But I noticed that I've carried that out with other adults and other people in my life, like you're saying. And when I have this expectation for people to be a certain way and do a certain thing, or even treat me a certain way, I find myself dealing with disappointment, but not even realizing that it's disappointment. It's just me being frustrated, and I take my it makes me become angry. But if I just realized it was just me being disappointed because they didn't meet my expectations, or I compare myself to other people in other situations or other relationships or other children, then I find myself being able to be easily frustrated in situations where I don't have to. Another aspect is a lack of control over outcomes. So when we're unable to control things, and everybody's different. Some people are kind of go with the flow, and whatever happens, happens, and they'll make it make sense and make it work. But for someone like me, one of my biggest concerns in life is lack of freedom and lack of control over the things that happen to me. And I think that's what has led me down the path I'm on now of doing things for others or even for myself that allows people to be free and find freedom and allow them to not necessarily get around rules, but allow them to live their life in such a way where they can have a little bit more control over their life. Like, hey, getting a good education may be hard, or getting the education in certain things may be difficult. But once you do a certain thing, or get a certain degree, or get a certain certificate, or certain whatever, you'll be able to have a little bit more control over your finances, or your destiny, or where you live, or where different things. But in general, in life, depending on where you live and what kind of country you live in, and what the government looks like, and the way your city's set up, and the way your housing authority is set up, there's always going to be somebody somewhere or some rule that's going to limit what you can do. But when we get worked up by the lack of control over outcomes, that's when this level of disappointment comes in, because it's one thing to realize, like, hey, I can't control everything, and there's some rules I have to follow, and there's some things that I have to do that keep me uh, in line or doing what's right. Or I wouldn't even say right, but just doing what's best for myself, for society. And sometimes, if I don't understand how societies work and how rules work and how things go, I can be upset about how my life is lived, right? And the outcomes, and not having the control over things. But then there's another level of outcomes where it's just like stuff just happens in life, and you can't control everything that happens. And at the end of the day, if we are trying to be in control over everything, we're gonna meet disappointment, and we're gonna have disappointment. And it's we gotta find a happy space where we're able to live the way we want to live, in a way that's righteous and that's godly and that's good for our neighbors and for life. But then we also have to understand, because of rules, because of governments, because of even expectations that God has for us, there are sometimes outcomes that happen that we don't have control of. And the lack of control is not something that we can live in. We can't live in that space. We just understand there's rules, we understand there's regulations, there's outcomes that are going to happen that are because of the things we do, and there's outcomes of things that's going to happen because of others. But we can't allow that disappointment to cause us to not live our best lives or feel some kind of way. And the other thing there is the unexpected changes or losses. Like, these can be small trivial things, or they can be serious life changing incidents. But we can't be afraid, or we can experience disappointment on those levels. But again, how we manage that disappointment is going to dictate kind of the outcomes that we have of those things. Any questions from anybody that's joined us? Okay, all right, we go on to the next. All right, so emotional impacts of disappointment. So one of the things, um, there's a lot of feelings associated with disappointment. And so generally sadness, frustration, and helplessness are the things that kind of come to us as humans, just kind of when we're dealing with disappointment. And these are normal feelings. This is what happens when we get disappointed. Again, as we'll talk about, it's what happens when we allow those feelings of sadness, frustration, and helplessness to kind of be, just overwhelming, or dictate to us how we live our life, is when that disappointment and the emotional impact of disappointment can become problematic. There can be an impact on our self-esteem and our motivation. Again, when we are consistently dealing with someone letting us down, or feeling as if we're not enough, or feeling like not understanding why these disappointments keep happening, it can impact our self-esteem. And also times when we're disappointed about something over and over again, we can lose motivation. I mean, case in point, we have an election that's coming up, and there's a lot of people, even in the year of our Lord 2024, who don't understand voting, and how it works, and the way in which it affects how we live, whether it's local elections or national elections. And they've lost the motivation to vote because they've been disappointed over and over again, either from our governments, our local governments, our elected officials, our federal government. And so that disappointment leads them to not voting. And so they lose that motivation to vote because they feel like their vote doesn't have an impact on things. And that's when I'm talking about, hey, we can't get to that place because of disappointment. We have to manage our disappointment in a way so that we don't become complacent with things and lose motivation for things, especially things that can impact our lives. And then lastly, for that, it's the potential to lead to depression or anxiety if not managed. So there's a real level of clinically diagnosable mental health things that can happen when we are so overwhelmed with disappointment that we don't see a way out, or we don't see that life can be any better, or we don't see that that things can be different for us. And so if we don't check that, or if that doesn't get dealt with, it can lead to depression or anxiety or other diagnosable mental health concerns. All right. Any questions there? Any comments?
So do you feel that so like say if something normally makes you feel sad, is it more important to when you say managing um, disappointments, is it more important to change the way that that thing makes you feel, or is it more important to learn how to be sad and still productive? So that's a
It's a mixed bag. That's a good
okay.
question. Yeah, it's a very good question. Did I cut you off though?
No, no, you got it.
Okay. Okay.
I was going to go a little further.
Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, you can if you want to elaborate, but I mean, I
No,
got it.
no.
But I don't want to cut you short. Okay. Yeah. No. I think it goes both ways, right? Because, um, I mean, I think it's always good to learn how to manage the way you feel. Um, and I think it's also always good to know and understand that there's going to be things that happen that you can't do anything about, and so you have to understand how to deal with those things. And so I think it's both, and like you can, and we'll get to it on the next slide as far as coping mechanisms, but there's ways in which we go about our lives dealing with things that disappoint us that aren't healthy, but they don't cause anybody any problems. Like, I can be disappointed in my we'll say my mom. Say she just disappoints me over and over and over and over and over again, but it's my mom, she's my elder, so I don't disrespect her, I don't say nothing crazy to her, but it just hurts my heart and it makes me sad, and I maybe distance myself from her, or I don't I'm not in relationship with her like I should be, but she doesn't know anything about it. I don't say anything to her about it. She's not wise to it, but I know secretly on the inside I might despise her or not like her or don't want her around my kids or just keep her at a distance. But again, not in a negative way. I don't say anything crazy, but that's not beneficial for me or for her or for our relationship. But I've learned this skill of this coping mechanism of just being without having a real conversation with her, without getting to the bottom of it, without trying to resolve things, and I can still live my life, right? And I may not be depressed or anxious, or I might not lose sleep or whatever, but that relationship is damaged. So without having those conversations and dealing with that, you have this undercurrent of something that could blow up or explode at some point in time. And so on the other end of that, when it comes to learning how to deal with situations, so we use the same example of, like, say I had a mother that disappointed me a lot in life, and it made me feel a certain way towards her. If I learn skills on how to redirect her, or say, for instance, if the issue is that she's always making promises that she can't keep, and I get excited like, hey, okay, I'm gonna go on a date night because my mom says she's gonna watch the kids tonight, and then week after week after week, she doesn't show up. And so I have to learn skills in ways to which, like, either I just change my expectations and don't rely on my mom to come watch the kids, Or I learned skills on how to which to approach that conversation. Like, hey, mom, like for the last month, I've been asking you, and you've been willing to come watch the kids every Tuesday night so I can have a date night, but you never show up. So, like, what's going on? And so I think if I'm answering your question, and let me know if I'm not, that there comes a point in time where one, you have to do what's good for you and manage those expectations or manage that disappointment and kind of deal with what that is on a personal level, on an inside level, so that that doesn't have like long-term effects on you. And at the same time, you also have to know and manage and learn that, hey, people disappoint you and they may disappoint you at the times where you need them the most. But if you allow that disappointment to take you to a dark place, it can affect you in ways that aren't good.
Yeah,
Did that answer your question? Okay.
question.
So, John, this is Irma.
Mm-hmm.
So, what
Yes.
if you find a way to deal
Mhm.
with disappointment? And let's just, well, you used your mother, but what if there's a person that you got disappointed in and you found a way to deal with your disappointment by saying, listen, this is something I can't control. It's bothering you, it's not bothering them. And so you just distance yourself from them, not physically, but mentally.
Mhm. That's a go ahead.
Would that destroy the relationship? Because this is a coping mechanism that I've developed for myself, or is it okay?
It goes. I think it's a two-part, right? So sometimes we need to distance ourselves from people that mean us no good, that may be toxic, or that might be harmful for us to be in relationship with that person. Now, if that's not the case, and if it's somebody that you actually want to have a relationship with, then it may be worth trying to have that conversation. Maybe you get some help first. Maybe some pastoral care, or go see a therapist, or talk to somebody to figure out ways in which you can have that conversation that won't get you worked up and you feel worse after the conversation. Or maybe you take somebody along with you that the other person respects, that you can have that conversation. But I think it can be very healthy to step away. But if stepping away means that you're losing a piece of yourself, or a relationship dies or dwindles that should flourish, or that should be good, or that should be healthy, then I think it's beneficial to figure out how to try to have a conversation. And then after you've had the conversation, or two or three, and you realize it's going nowhere, then what they say, shake the dust off your feet and you kind of keep it moving. But you don't have to be in a place to allow somebody to hurt you, right? You don't have to be in a place to allow somebody to disappoint you. But I think you do yourself a disservice when you don't try to at least make amends, or not maybe make amends, but at least try to approach a conversation to kind of figure out, like, hey, why does this keep happening, or what's going on? And if that person is, not willing to have that conversation, or they make it seem like you're the only person with the problem, then you kind of move on. But the real test is, how does it make you feel by not being in a relationship with that person? And if you're feeling that way because you've distanced yourself and you cut yourself off and you've gone cold, then that's probably not what you want. But if you've distanced yourself because you realize there's no hope and it's better for you and your mental health and for your, not personal, but just for your mental health, then that's, there's not really anything wrong with that per se.
Okay, thank you.
So,
do you agree, disagree, or go ahead, sir?
Kind of piggybacking on what I'm saying. So is it smart, and because I can see the pros and the cons, is it smart then to define individual relationships? Or should there be kind of like a general definitions of what you expect out of relationships? So should you kind of drill down and say, you know what, from this relationship, this is what this is this is what I expect, this is what I look, this is what I think about it, and kind of deal with that relationship on its own, to where, you know what, they are not really meeting my expectations, but you know what, I'm going to define this relationship as, an association, and just go kind of relationship by relationship? Or should you have a good general, like two or three categories of relationships and what you expect from them? I don't know if I'm being clear or not.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And feel free to let me know if what I'm saying doesn't make sense or doesn't resonate. But I've heard it said that people, uh, depending on who you are. So I have when I was working in the music industry and doing some different things, I had people that would want to access me because of who I was connected with, right? They want to give them a mixtape or get on the next verse of the album or send them some music or whatever the case may be. And I had a hard time understanding, like, man, I'm developing these relationships with people thinking they want to be my friends or they care about me or they like me, just to find out a month or two later that they were really just trying to get to this other person that was more important to me in life. And so when I was talking with somebody, they was like, hey, sometimes in life, you have people that are people that pour into you, people that you pour into, and then sometimes you have people that can do both. Like you pour into them, they pour into you. And so with the people that pour into you, they may not expect much from you in terms of like being able to be like best friends and mutually beneficial. They just know like, hey, they're like a mentor, somebody that you call or talk to when you need some advice or need some help. And maybe you have some other small interactions outside of that, but they and you don't have the expectations of you coming to them and being a shoulder for them to cry on or somebody that they can lean on. Then there may be people in your life that you know up front that they only call you when they need something, and maybe not always money, but just when they need a listening ear or somebody to talk to or somebody to pass an idea by. And they may not be somebody that want to hang out with you and go watch a game or go golf or just hang out with or whatever the case may be. And then you have people that go both. But that's usually when you're just talking about like general like come and go and people that are just kind of around. Like it's I think a different expectation when you're talking about family members or church members or people that you're in close proximity with that you spend a lot of time with. I think generally those type of relationships, I think it's good to have maybe not a determined relationship. So when I was younger, when I was in the dating phase of life, the guys that were around me, I was like, oh, you need to have a DTR, DTR, DTR. And DTR was a conversation where you determine the relationship with that girl. Are we just friends? Are we dating? Are we trying to be more? And so that everybody was on the same page and nobody's feelings were getting hurt or whatever. And so you may not have to have that level of depth of conversation with everybody, but I do think it's healthy for us as individuals to have conversations and to know or to be aware of the type of people that we're engaging with so that we don't have the wrong expectations of who they are in our life. And then also that we don't put more pressure on them to be something in our lives that they don't have the desire to be or the capacity to be or the willingness to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that was real helpful right there because I see what you're saying. Like they might not even, I mean, like you said, you have access to something that they want. You're not necessarily the thing they want,
Mm-hmm.
but you have access. And so if that's what it is, and if you classify it the right way, okay, so maybe my conversation with you is better, when you leave a message on the answer machine, I'm not going to take the time to grab this call.
Mm-hmm.
But you're important enough to where I'll go back and listen to the messaging and return your call when I can. So I'm not putting more in it that I feel that I should put in it. But I'm helping you in what you're trying to accomplish. I'm not just being cold to you. And so I think that when you don't sacrifice more than you think that you feel that you are, it's almost equal sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't put you high on the I don't put you high on the priority list, but I do pay attention to what it is that you desire, and when I get around to it, I can help you out, and then I'm not so disappointed because it's almost like it's somewhere near equal sacrifice.
Yep, 100%, 100%. Yep, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Is that, man? Oftentimes, when it comes to relationships with people, we will put somebody in a place that they're not, and we will be disappointed when they don't meet that expectation. Um, Especially when it comes to like divulging secrets. Like I have found out that my business is in the streets when I confided in somebody that I thought was somebody that could
Right,
hold water. Come to
right.
find out that they couldn't hold water, and then now I'm exposed, right? And so, again, on the level of disappointment, that's a 10 out of 10. Like I'm very disappointed in you, sir, ma'am, because I thought we had a relationship to where that would stay between us. But that person didn't have that same thing, or they're just somebody that likes to gossip or spill the secrets or whatever the case may be. But oftentimes when we find ourselves in those situations that we put our trust in somebody that we shouldn't, it's a major, 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 major source of disappointment. And you hit it on the head. That level expectations, when we have the wrong expectations, That's what gets us. That's what gets us.
But John, when that happens, that has happened to me. Somebody I thought was my ride or die, and thank God it wasn't something that I wouldn't have wanted the public to know, but it was something I didn't want the public to know.
Right, right.
And when she did it, it was with some people that I didn't even know. And I wouldn't have known that she told this secret. But when I got to the table, one of the people she told confronted me about it. But I was cool. I played it off. I said, well, people have their little problems, and they just have images about how they would like to look or something. And okay, so my hair, I'm having a bad hair day. I'm just using that. And so because I played it off like that, she thought it was okay. But I turned her off completely. She doesn't know that I turned her off, but I have nothing else to do with her because this was something I told her. And you're right. I don't know if I was disappointed as much as I wanted to tag her, but I was, but you're right. You find, and to this very day, she does not know that I feel that way about her because I distanced myself from her mentally.
Right.
And if she needed me, I'd be there. But that ride or die, no. No. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. So, John, I'm getting ready to listen. So I did that exact same thing that Irma was talking about. I saw this guy at a gas station last week. And so I did what Irma did probably let me see, I got divorced from my first marriage in 94. And so probably around 92. Probably around 92, I found out a dude that I was, pretty close with, that he knew what I was doing, and so he kind of used that to make an attempt to take a shot at my wife, and she told me. And so the way I chose to do it was just like what Irma did. Instead of confronting him, said, you know what, he really ain't that important to me, and I cut him off as it relates to what I care about him. But I still saw him, what's up, but I didn't hang out anymore and things like that. And I just saw him at a gas station, and this is probably what, 22 years late? No, not 22. 32. This is 32 years later.
30, yeah, 30.
And when I saw him, he was like real happy to see me. But I had literally cut him off. I had literally done what Irma did. I had literally cut him off. And so my greetings were not like this was an old close friend. My greetings was like this was a old backstab. And so I spoke to him, and I wonder how healthy that is. And for me, it feels healthy because it don't matter. But I wonder if it's really and truly healthy. Then so my question is, do you confront it? Do you ignore it, or do you figure out what's best? Because I when Irma said that, that reminded me of that contact, and it was perfectly healthy, fine for me to say, hey, what's up? Yeah, we need to get together, knowing that ain't no way I'm trying to, be in contact with you. What's your thing? You think you it's an individual base? You figure out what's the best way to handle it on their own, or you ignore it, or you confront it. What's your is there a silver bullet?
Well, first of all, I commend you because where I'm from, if he'd have smiled like that, I'd have had 32 options of welcoming his teeth to my fist. But we're all past that. We're adults, we good. But I think that in the moment, right? So if we think about had you confronted him during that time when it first happened, it probably would have been a bad situation, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Right. So I think in that moment you did the right thing of like, hey, you know what? This relationship with this person is not even that important. And what they did is so egregious, they crossed a line that men shouldn't cross. In that situation, it wasn't like he was your brother or or somebody or her brother or somebody that was trying to warn her. He was actually trying to slide in, right? So that's real greasy, and that's never okay, right? But I think in that moment you handled it the right way because it could have went a different type of way, right? But I think what happens is in those situations where we choose to deprioritize that person in our life or no longer give them space in our lives, we have to monitor if it's a defense mechanism to allow us to not harm that person, or is it something that we do that's going to eat away at us over time? And what I mean by that is sometimes there are people that we probably could be in relationship with, but because they do something to us, it doesn't sit right with us, and deep down inside we really mourn or lost of that relationship and really wish we had that relationship. And I think that's when you can tell the difference. If you can just go on about your business and act like the person never existed, then you know what I'm saying. It is what it is. Unless the Lord is speaking to you and say you need to call John and have a conversation with him because you need to get it right. But if it's not like that and y'all ain't like that, and it's not going to affect you, the way you raise your kids, the way you live your life, how you make your money, then some relationships just get lost, right? But if something is tugging on your heart, if you just can't necessarily, you're not necessarily losing sleep, but if you just know that there's something there that's still tugging, I would say then it may be worth trying to maybe not in that situation, but if it's something different, it may be worth trying to settle it, if nothing else. Like you don't necessarily have to be like, let's be best friends again. You didn't told my business, but more so like, hey, I want to have peace so that I know that you wronged me, but I don't hold no grudges against you. I don't hold, there's nothing inside of me that I would have to stand before the Lord one day and be like, oh, well, you never forgave John for that thing. Not that it might keep you out of heaven, but it's just one of those things you don't want to have something on your docket that can be read back to you like, what about this? And so does that make sense? Like I feel like there's times when you can try to get clarity and seek resolution without trying to re-engage a friendship or a relationship for you, what's best for you. And there's times that you just need to step away and let that thing go. And then, like you said, when you see him 20, 30 years down the line, oh, man, good to see you. Oh, yeah, okay, we'll link up. You ain't got my number, but I'm not going to give it to you. But all right, we'll see. If that makes sense.
But no, that's I like that thing that kind of the fact that this relationship right here ain't necessary. I think you kind of judge how important it is, and so it's not I'm not the person I'm gonna hate, but it's really it's really no point to trying to I mean, what good is it gonna do my life to have a relationship with a spin? And there's some people that you gotta have a relationship with because of where they fit in your life. And so I kind of you kind of showed me some things. So I don't feel guilty at all. Because he asked me, he said, "You got my number?" And so I was like, and so I act like I was typing in my phone. I wasn't typing nothing in my phone. But the Lord gonna pay me back one day. He probably gonna come down and join my church one day. So
There
Lord
you
gonna
go.
pay me
There you go.
back. Lord gonna pay me back.
But the
Yeah,
thing,
then you gonna have everything.
but the thing that what you think about is that when you see that person, it doesn't matter how long it has been. When you see that person, you immediately think of what they did. You Bobo, you did, but then you wonder, does it occur to them? Did they think that they were doing something to hurt you? But my thing is, and you're right, John, I may have to pay for this later. But I just I just said, okay, I'm done with you. I'm just and if because I'm a ride or die person. If I care about you, oh no, it's like your family. You can be having this big fight, but nobody else better hit you. And that's how I am. You my partner. I'm your ride or die. I'm not letting anybody. I'm standing up for you. You may tick me off about something, but that's between you and me. I'm not letting anybody else harm you. And so I guess you're right about expectations. I expect for people to feel that way too. And that's probably my problem because I can't expect for people to behave the way I would. So, yeah, you're right. Expectations and disappointments. it could affect you negatively, but I'm trying to get a hold on that. I'm trying to get a hold on communicating and just instead of just saying, "Okay, I'm done with you."
Yep. No, and I mean it's a lot involved. There's a lot to unpack because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if what did George Bush try to say one time? It said, "Dog bite you once," and then I don't think he can remember what the rest of the thing was, but it was "Dog bite you once, bad dog. Dog bite you twice, bad me." And so it's one of those things where if someone shows you who they are, sometimes you got to believe them. You know what I'm saying? Most times, all the time, you got to believe them, right? People can grow and they can change.
Yeah.
Right? People can develop over time and people can become something different. And again, I mean, because again, too, maybe you're right, though. Maybe that person didn't think it was a big deal, or maybe they didn't know how serious you were about keeping that between y'all. And maybe they thought they were trying to help you by or trying to understand something or have a conversation with somebody else about you instead of just asking you. I don't know. Or they could be messy, right? So I think it's one of those things where you really got to like, hey, dog bite me once. If I let this person back in, they do it to me again. All right, now that was on me, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But it really just boils down to, I think, if it's not eating you, if you can sleep at night, then I think that's a good test of whether or not this thing is really a thing. But if there's anything that's in there, like, man, again, I'm like you. I'm from LA. I'm from the culture of like is friends, and you ride for your homies, you do everything you need to do. But I've had to learn over time. I got into an incident one time where me and my best friend, both the littlest guys always in our classroom or whatever, and we would tag team on people. Like if the big dude, if he was trying to fight my homie, you got to fight both of us. And then one day my boy moved off. He left. He moved to Arkansas, and I thought I was still the same guy. And I tried to talk trash to this dude. And mind you, I'm in high school, but I had to stand on the in the gym. I had to stand on the seat that they have inside the boys' locker room to be as tall as this guy. And I'm talking trash, and I see him look around, and I think he realized my boy wasn't there. And he pushed me so hard off that seat. I hit the ground like one of those chalk outlines, and I was just like, oh, I'm about to die. Right? And so, but it wasn't just that. It was the fact that I heard everybody saying, let him get him. John's always talking trash anyway. It's about time he get beat up. And I was like, nobody's got my back. Like, it's a gym. It's a locker room full of people, and they all want to see my demise. They all want me to catch a fade. And I was like, yo, okay, all right. I'm in this by myself, right? And so for me, I just grew up in the sense that somebody got to have my back, or I got to have somebody's back. Or we got, if we friends, we friends. But I only come to realize that, especially in that scenario, these people that's kicking it with me every day, helping me eat my lunch, spending my lunch money, hanging out with me, they didn't have my back at all, and was hoping that one day my demise will come. And so I think in that situation, hopefully that person's not that person. But we do have to realize, like, as much as we want to be down for people and have people's backs, man, when people show us what they really about, you gotta, sometimes we gotta cut that.
Yeah, there's a song by Brooke Benton. Brooke Benton was before your time, but it's called The Snake. And this lady, there's a snake that's in the snow or something, and this lady brings the snake in, put him by the fireplace, and nurses him back. And she picked him up one day, and he bit her. And she's saying, I took you in, I fed you, I nursed you back to health. And he's like, shut up, silly woman. You knew I was a snake when you took me in. Okay, so same thing. Believe it.
Yep. That's it. And so we gotta cut them snakes out. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think we could. Okay. All right. We can go to the next slide then. So the next slide is talking about coping mechanisms. So we kind of talked about it a little bit. And so coping mechanisms can be good or they can be bad. But I think on the positive ends of things, when we're dealing with disappointment, one of the ways in which we can cope, coping mechanisms has good connotations and bad and negative connotations, but acknowledge our feelings. Like you're saying, hey, if this person has done this to me, this hurts. And then you go through the process. Okay, is this warranted pain? Did they mean to hurt my feelings? Is this something I should have my feelings hurt by? And if it's yeah, this is something that I should be disappointed because that person broke our trust. Then hey, like you know how to move forward and you can do what you need to do. Then you allow yourself to grieve. You know, like hey, like you know what? I thought this relationship was more important to the both of us. I see that it wasn't. Now I have to go through the process of mourning that loss. Like, hey, that we just not gonna be friends. And if I see you in 30 years, guess what? I'm gonna be pushing buttons, but it ain't gonna be to save your number. Like it just is what it is, right? Um, and then when it comes to practicing self-compassion, sometimes when we get disappointed, we find ways to beat ourselves up about it or to make it our fault or to make it about us when it's really about them or the situation or again or whatever it is that we find in our disappointment in. We have to understand that hey, it's okay to feel how we feel, given it's a healthy feeling. And we can't let people off the hook and make it about us and make it our fault. Like, hey, no, I acknowledge that this person did this thing. Hey, this relationship might be dead or might not. We'll figure out how that goes. But I have to allow myself to go through this process and understand that I'm still good. I still have worth. I still have value. I'm still important, even though disappointment has happened. And then what we also want to do is we want to avoid suppressing emotions. Because like we're talking about in the last scenario, the last two scenarios, there's one thing to be like, hey, I'm gonna carry on about my business and that relationship is dead. But it's another thing to go numb because we go numb and we go numb and we ignore and we ignore. And next thing you know, we are finding ourselves in these disappointing situations over and over again because we didn't learn the lesson or we didn't pay attention or we didn't allow ourselves to feel those emotions that came with that disappointment. So then we keep feeling it. We keep getting disappointed over and over again. And not realizing like, oh shoot, I'm having the same traps. I'm falling into the same traps. I'm doing the same things over and over again because I didn't deal with the emotions because I tried to hide it or suppress it. And now I find myself here again. But generally, when we're in tune with our emotions and something is that bad, like the dog bite me once is automatic. Like you don't have to take a whole lot. It's like, okay, I remember this. This has happened before. I remember how I felt last time. I don't want to do this again. I don't want to be in that place if it's healthy, right? We can avoid conflict and we can avoid disappointment in an unhealthy way. But if it's healthy, we got to feel it, we got to feel it, we got to feel it, and then we got to deal with it, and then we got to move forward. Any questions there?
I agree.
Okay. All right. And then reframing your perspective. So this is a big deal. Perspective is the thing that is the killer and the thing that leads to the most disappointment all the time. How we view the situation or how we view the disappointment or the disappointing thing is going to 100% influence the outcome of that situation. And so sometimes when we get met with disappointment, we have negative thoughts that come with that. Instead of, again, letting it be on the other person or recognizing that's a flaw in someone else or recognizing it's the flaw in a system or whatever, when we get met with disappointment, it becomes inward and we have these negative thoughts. And so instead of doing that, we can view the disappointment as a learning opportunity. You know, the young boys say, I don't take a loss, I just learn lessons, right? I'm not taking no losses, no L's. Everything that happens or things that happen to me that may seem like a roadblock or a disappointment or something that gets in the way, it's a lesson. And it's up to me to find the lesson in that thing. It's up to me to find, the silver lining in that cloud. It's up to me to find the light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm usually the only person that's hurt when I wallow in that disappointment, and I don't learn from that situation. And we've talked about it a little bit, adjusting your expectations. If I know that my significant other doesn't care about, let's say, something like paying bills on time, hey, I have to have that. I have to understand, like, hey, that person isn't going to do that. Let me be in charge of managing that. And be happy to do it, because if I'm frustrated every time the first of the month comes up and the rent is late, like, oh, they're that's not how they don't mind paying the $50 late fee, and I do, right? So let me take care of that. Let me find a way to have the conversation, like, hey, I understand this is not your strong suit. I know we place this responsibility in your hand, but let me go ahead and take that over. Let me adjust how I feel about it on the back end so that I can do this thing well and do it efficiently and not take it out on the other person. But as long as I keep having the wrong expectations for that person, I'm gonna keep finding myself in a situation where I'm upset or frustrated. Again, focusing on what you can control. I can control me. I can't control you. I can't control the situation sometimes. I can't control what's going on, but I can control me. There's a song that's out now. I haven't checked the scriptural accuracy of it, but they said, Lord, fix me don't fix the problem. And I'm like, sometimes that's what it is. If you get yourself together, and if the problem never gets sorted out, if you're good, you can be good. And that problem, again, could be the other person. It could be what it is. Again, I'm not talking about voting and different things that we have the opportunity to do something about. But if we can't control the thing and we're too busy focused on trying to control it or trying to figure out why this thing keeps happening over and over again, we're going to be in a sad place, right? So we just got to focus on what we can control and reframe things from there. And just develop a growth mindset. We just make sure we're always in a space of growth, always in a space of learning, always in a space of trying to do better and be better. And disappointment won't hit us so hard when we figure out how to grow and move beyond that disappointment. All right, and we can go to the next one. So building resilience is kind of just the ability to bounce back from setbacks. And again, it goes back with the taking the lessons and not losses. And so techniques on building resilience is developing strong relationships. That could be personal, that could be professional, that could be, whatever that looks like, but having strong relationships so that when the setbacks happen, you can have that conversation, you can have somebody to lean on to help you bounce back. Practicing mindfulness and stress management. Mindfulness is an idea of it's a technique that we use to help people be in the moment and be present. It's very good for people that are busy, whose phones ring all day and they always got stuff to do. Mindfulness is a situation where I'm like, hey, you're busy every day. Take 5 minutes where you turn your phone off, you close your laptop, you step away from what you got going on, be present and check in with yourself. See, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling overworked? Are you feeling overwhelmed? De-escalate. Get yourself a popsicle. Do whatever you need to do to be in that space where you can be present with yourself, with your feelings, with your emotions. Manage that stuff of what you got going on. Woosah, and then get back to it. And there's other things that you can do, but that's the basic idea of being mindful. You just want to be present with what you got going on, with your feelings, with your emotions, and kind of step away from the things that could be bothering you or bogging you down and making your life difficult. And then stress management. We stress. And if we don't take care of it, it can lead to heart attack, it can lead to stroke, it can lead to aneurysms, it can lead to weight loss, weight gain. There's so many things that can come from poorly managing stress. There's good stress and there's bad stress. And sometimes stress is good to motivate us to get what we're doing, but there's stress that can overwhelm us and that can make us sick and mentally unhealthy. And so we have to have positive, healthy stress management techniques, whether that's taking a walk, whether that's spending time with your loved one, whether, again, that's getting a popsicle, whatever it is that you're doing that doesn't create another bad habit, because there's different things we can do to manage stress, but now you're addicted, and that's not what you want. But you want that to happen. And then you want to have realistic goals. You want to make sure that you're setting realistic goals, and what you're actually trying to do is something you can do. And if it's overwhelming to you, put that aside, put that down, maybe revisit it later, or pass that task on to somebody else. And then practical strategies, kind of like.
I had one thing. I had one thing I wanted to say regarding reframing perspective. Thank you for giving me some insight on your pastor and focusing on the things that you can control. And it's just a technique, and this is just giving him kudos. I was like, man, why is he stepping on my toes? Early on in our relationship, he assumed all the responsibilities of paying the bill when we were living in the world of not enough and having to take from Peter to pay Paul. That was not my strong suit. And I must admit now that I didn't deal well with not having enough and trying to juggle a lot. But he took on the responsibility of just handling all the bills and making sure that things were paid. And so having been present today, I understand that part of that probably was helping him to focus on what he can control and keeping him mentally stable, because I was probably making him unstable with how much I stressed over not being able to juggle during those hard times.
Yes, ma'am. I understand. And that's the reality of this life that we live. Like, and that's one thing that I feel like oftentimes we don't do enough. And I can't say I just my own experience and things I've been around, especially with premarital. A lot of times people, they have these shallow surface level conversation in premarital counseling, and you don't get to the real deal stuff. And sometimes, like when I do premarital with people, I talk about those things like, hey, what happens when the money get funny? What happens with this? Who does the what? Who's da-da-da? Who's good with this? Who's good with that? And we try to have people set up an expectation of what it's going to look like. Now, when you get married, everything changes, right? There's one, you can have conversations premarital, but if you're not going into marriage having those real hard conversations, not to say that y'all didn't, but But what I'm saying is like people don't even do those things at all.
No, we
They
didn't.
get met
We
with all
we
these
didn't.
things, huh?
We didn't.
You say you did?
Our
Okay,
marriage,
okay,
our
okay.
marriage
I
counseling
wasn't trying to
session,
put you
our
out there. I
marriage
was just
counseling session was 15 minutes.
all right. Well, lessons learned. Lessons learned. Lessons learned. Um, so yeah, it's one of those things where when you have those conversations up front, then you kind of know how that works. And so, like you're saying, like y'all, you figured it out. Pastor Rawls was led by the Spirit of God and spoke to him and said, "Hey, sir, take them bills, take over the bills," and it worked out.
I was led by
that's how these things should work.
I was led by making sure bill collectors wasn't gonna keep disrespecting my wife.
Oh, say that
Yeah.
again. I couldn't hear you.
I said I was led by the fact that I wasn't gonna let bill collectors keep disrespecting my wife. No, you can talk to me this way, but you can't talk to my wife this way.
Yes.
I didn't hear that, Pastor All. Say it again.
I said I was led by bill collectors. I wasn't gonna let them disrespect my wife. You can talk to me like this, but you ain't gonna talk to my wife like this.
Hey, sometimes that's what it takes. That's what it takes. It takes a village. It takes a bill collector to raise a family. So it's all good. Yeah, but yeah, for managing disappointment. So we kind of been talking about it, but again, having goals that are realistic, things that you can actually do. Again, if somebody's better with something, let that person take that over in a relationship, or just knowing the goals that you set for yourself, so you don't become disappointed in your own performance. Just setting real goals. Sometimes you got to break tasks into smaller groups. So if your disappointment comes from not being able to finish something or being able to manage something well, maybe you're trying to do too much. And then regularly review and adjust your expectations. That's in marriage, that's in life, that's in friendships. Like, man, I got friends that I'm holding on to for these last 35 years that I'm trying to find on the internet, and I finally find them, and they're not trying to be my friend, and I'm so confused. Like, what? I don't understand. I've been looking for you for 35 years. And I had this time of 35 years where I had this expectation. When I found my boy, we was going to be best friends again, and it was crickets when I finally got in contact, right? It's one of those things where in life, we to manage disappointment and make sure that we don't get led astray by something disappointing us, we just got to review and make sure that what we got going on or what we're thinking about is something that we should actually be doing. And then keep a positive attitude. It's easy to get disappointed, and it's even easier to wallow in that disappointment by having a bad attitude. But we got to do right by that. And then we can go to the next one. I'm about to wrap up soon. And so the next slide is talking about seeking support, right? And so disappointment is, again, an easy thing to kind of let go, to let it lie under the surface, to kind of just be something that's a silent killer. But when we feel disappointed and we recognize we're disappointed, let's have that conversation. Maybe not to that person that disappointed you necessarily, but reaching out to friends, family, a support group, people you can trust, someone that will keep your secret. And then sometimes I suggest to grown adults, like, hey, sometimes you got to keep a diary too. Something that like you just write things out as reminders that you can go back and look at and be like, hey, you know what? This thing happened. I want to make sure that I managing that well. And if I can't talk to somebody about it because of the nature of the thing, you just got to get it out of your head. And so sometimes writing, journaling, whatever, keeping a diary is another way that if you can't necessarily trust people with this thing and to help you manage that disappointment, you've got other options. Then there's professional help, thinking a therapist or getting counseling. And then there's spiritual guidance from a faith leader, from your pastor, getting some pastoral care. And then on my last slide, something I haven't done in the past, but I just felt like, this might be a good time to do this. But I wanted to kind of just lay out for those that are led by scripture and want the words on the pages to kind of be a guide for us and allow us to, just understand that even though we're talking about mental health and sometimes there's this push to separate church and state when it comes to psychology and Christianity, the Bible's very clear on God wanting to be there for us in times of disappointment and in times of need. And here I just got some scriptures that just kind of stood out to me and kind of understanding like, hey, man, disappointment's going to happen. People are going to let us down. Situations are going to be bad. Governments are going to let us down. But God is very, 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 very present. He's there. And there's ways in which he wants us to manage our disappointment. So I just choose two of these. Jeremiah 29:11 is a very familiar scripture. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare or for good and not for evil, and to give you a future and a hope. And no matter who's disappointed us or how we've been disappointed or how many times we've been disappointed in life, we have a help. We have a person. We have a God and a spirit that dwells within us that can lift us up, that can bring joy, that can remind us that this is not always going to be the situation, that God has plans for us despite what the world may be trying to do, the things that people that you think your friends end up being your enemies are trying to do. God cares for us. And he knows the plans that he has for us. And those plans are good. And sometimes we got to remind ourselves when we're in those moments of disappointment that he has good plans for us. And I think one that I like to go to a lot of times with people is Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And disappointment is one of those things where, hey, if we find it beyond us to get past this disappointment, if we can't have conversation with people, we're figuring out how to manage what we got going on, God can give us a peace that surpasses all understanding, that he can give us advice, he can give us wisdom, he can put people in our lives that can give us advice and give us wisdom on how to manage that thing. And disappointment is not something that we have to deal with on our own. We have hopefully a team of people, a group of people, or one person, or a pastor, somebody you can go to, or a professional that can help us with that disappointment. But disappointment is not something that we have to wrestle with on our own and let it overtake us. Any final questions, comments, concerns?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful session, John. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. You're welcome.
All right, all right. Looks like everybody's in agreement that our session was wonderful today. And so we thank John for always being prepared to give us some good information, and just ask that you share it with somebody. If you're having this conversation with somebody, y'all go back and look at the video together. And the whole point is as we look at making ourselves whole, strong, and healthy, that we do it in every aspect of our lives, not just physically and spiritually, but also mentally. So thank you so much. Thank you everybody for coming. Hopefully I'll see you all tomorrow at our Real Talk Bible study at 6 o'clock and our noonday prayer at noon. God bless you and have a great one.
Good night.
All right.
All right.
Good night. Good night.